welcome to Screen Queensland's Writing a Rom-Com session. So excited to have everyone here today. We've got a record number of people signed up. There's about 170 of you out there. So very excited to bring you Hilary and Liz, who are the writing duo extraordinaire, fresh off working on Hoodlum's working title. This is Lost and Found, which is a film that was shot recently in Queensland in, I think, August and September, and is a Netflix feature and will be premiering on Netflix in 2022, I believe. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Hackett and Hilary Galanoy, writers from Lost and Found, but also an absolute string of other amazing rom-coms that they've worked on together. So as a writing team, they have sold original material and completed rewrites on projects at numerous American production companies, studios, cable channels, and streamers, including Universal, Fox, Paramount, and Freeform. Liz and Hilary's produced works include the hit Netflix rom-coms Falling in Love and Love Guaranteed, and Hallmark Channel's My Best Friend's Bouquet, Swept Up by Christmas, and Fur Crazy. Liz and Hilary have also worked to create family content, penning Disney Channel's Geek Charming, Nickelodeon's musical Rags, and working as writers and co-producers on Netflix award-winning children's program Project MC Squared. So yeah, in their spare time, Liz is witty on Twitter and Hilary enjoys wine and yoga, but not at the same time. And so it's my absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to come to welcome both from LA, different parts of LA, I believe. Yes. And so take it away, just to say there will be a short amount of time at the end for a Q&A that we'll kind of jump into. But over to you.
All right, well, welcome everybody. We're very excited. Thank you so much for hosting us today.
Yes, thank you.
We can't see all 170 of you, and that's probably good because that would make me nervous. So we're just really flattered that you guys are interested in hearing a little bit of our wisdom about screenplay writing. So Liz and I are old friends, and we were actually friends for years before becoming writing partners. And we're going to talk about the writing partnership process a little bit later on in our talk. And we have been writing together for almost 20 years, and which is hard to believe. One of the longest relationships of our lives. We both laugh about that. We've both been married less time than we've been writing partners. Yeah. And fortunately, we really enjoy working together. We'll talk more about that later too. But yes, we're in different parts of Los Angeles. I live in Santa Monica.
I live kind of near the valley area in a canyon.
Liz lives in a very cool place called Topanga, if you guys have ever heard of it. It's very hippie and awesome up there. So we've always lived in separate places, so the Zoom of it all is just completely normal to us. So
yeah.
So anyway, we wanted to talk a little bit, because we know this is about writing romantic comedies, and so we wanted to talk a little bit about why we like to write romantic comedies. We've written other things too, obviously, but our bread and butter and really our joy is romantic comedies. And so, we were talking about it before we got on the webinar today, and we think that, they're feel-good movies, right, Liz? So
yeah. I mean, I think when you decide to pursue writing, you kind of find your thing, and I think we both like the movies that, look, there are gritty movies, there are thrillers, there are really dark movies, but we like the movies that you want to watch when you're homesick, the things that make you feel good when you're sad, that are just kind of balm for the soul. And yeah. I mean, the nice thing is now with the streamers, that people are actually making those again.
Yeah, there was a time nobody was making romantic comedies, and it sucked, and it was also not a very good business decision, because there's an audience out there for them all the time. So because we also write Hallmark movies, and they're not as funny usually. they're getting more funny, or they're not funny on purpose. But you know, people like it, the romance. We want to just be swept away and live in some other world where everybody's beautiful and it's romantic and things are perfect.
Yeah, and movies as escape. And, you know, I mean, the best way to escape is two people falling in love that you would not expect to fall in love. And we love people falling in love.
Exactly. So we want to talk a little bit about where ideas come from. So this is something people ask us a lot. And it's true, ideas are a tough one. You know, we think that honestly, what you need to do is always just be open to ideas. We literally have like what we sort of call like a notebook of ideas, and it's on our computer, but sometimes something will occur to us, we'll be talking about something, and we like jot it down for like future reference. So it's like, of course, they can come from your imagination, news stories and magazines, inspired by true life, or like simply observing the world around you. So like, we'll tell you how we came up with 3 of our ideas.
And sometimes also it's just, you know, asking people how they met. Because if you ask people in your life how they met, you're going to find some really interesting stories. And you can sort of creatively borrow and make them your own. But it's a great way of just how do people meet in the world. Anyway, so Hilary, carry on.
Oh, okay. So for instance, we wrote a movie a number of years ago called Fur Crazy, FIR. So it's about a Christmas tree lot. And it was loosely based on an article I had read in the LA Times about New York City Christmas tree lots and how they have to stay open 24/7 because there's nowhere to store the trees. And we suddenly thought this could be a really fun romantic comedy idea, sold it to Hallmark and made it. And then Falling in Love, so that's INN, if you guys haven't already figured out, we like a good pun. Falling in Love was based off, your friend actually did this, Liz, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there have been multiple news articles also about this, of just people who apply to win a historic inn.
Like
and
you write an essay and the best one wins. So so we also thought, wouldn't that be great? Somebody wins an inn, they go, it's a money pit, and you know, the local contractor romance flourishes, right? And then Love Guaranteed was our most recent movie that streamed on Netflix, and that starred Rachel Lee Cook, and it was actually Rachel Lee Cook's idea that she brought to us. But Rachel got it from an idea. So the premise of Love Guaranteed is a guy sues a dating app for false advertising. And Rachel had read an article about this guy who sued Coors, which is a beer manufacturer, what do you want to call it, distillery, here in America, Coors beer, that they claim that they're made with Rocky Mountain water, the beer is, but it's not. And so this guy sued for false advertising. And so we were like, wouldn't this be funny if it had to do with a dating app? So those are just some of the where we like get our ideas from. And then just in general, when you're thinking about romantic comedies, there's really 2 ways that you can tackle a romantic comedy. And they can be, by the way, they're not either or. You can definitely combine these, and I think we always try to. So there's definitely the tropes, is like sort of what we call them. And you know what these romantic comedies are as soon as you even hear the name, see the poster, or definitely when you see the trailer. Like one is I Can't Stand Each Other, Enemies to Friends. Another one is Star-Crossed Lovers. There's love triangles, Secret Identity, Fake Relationship, Stuck Together like on a desert island or whatever, Forbidden Love, Second Chances at Love. I mean, you guys could probably come up with some of your own. Romantic comedies don't have to fall into one of these categories for sure, but it helps a lot.
Yeah, and
it's a familiar engine.
Yeah, and there are also things that are kind of based on sort of like a thesis about love. Like when Harry Met Sally, it's like men and women can't be friends. Or It's Complicated. It's like, what if 2 divorced people realize they kind of still had feelings for each other? Which I think people really identify with, just real human relationship quandaries that we all find ourselves in.
Exactly.
We've all had someone that we're kind of secretly in love with, or who is a friend that we're like, do we cross the line? Do we not? Do we say the thing? Or, you know,
And that's definitely what makes a good romantic comedy, from, in our opinion, from a one that doesn't work, is it's not that it can't have this big hook, you know, that is predictable, because one of the things we like about romantic comedies as an audience is we know they're going to get together in the end, but it's the way you approach it, you know. And it is like Liz just said, if you have that underlying theme that's universal, it will go a lot further than just like two people who can't stand each other stuck on a desert island, because that's fine. But if there's not a deeper theme about having something to do with love, you're never gonna, it's not gonna pop.
And I think that's also why we watch these movies over and over again, is we see ourselves in these characters and their love predicaments. So the more, you know, if there's some sort of truth-based element, I mean, comedy is basically uncomfortable truths. And, you know, that's the love story we go back to again and again.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also just want to say that there definitely are more character-driven romantic comedies. Liz just mentioned something like When Harry Met Sally or Something's Gotta Give are really good examples. They don't have quite the same like obvious hook, but they definitely still follow all of the parameters of a romantic comedy, you know, where you definitely have there's a conflict at the heart, and we know in the end it will be resolved to have our two leads be together. So that leads us into talking about characterization. So character is just honestly the most important part of screenwriting. It is definitely what drives your story. And having unique, identifiable, lovable characters in a romantic comedy is important. In other genres, you don't have to like them at all. In romantic comedies, you really have to, of course, feel that you could be that person.
And you're also rooting for these people to fall in love. You want them to, you know, kiss at the end of the movie.
Exactly. So Liz and I usually start off with thinking, you know, we're just a little bit about character development, is who is our protagonist? You know, that's where we usually start any kind of, when we're brainstorming ideas. This is usually like where we start. Who is this person? What are they about? Where are they coming from? And we don't just mean literally like they live in Denver. It's like, you know, what is their story? And one of the most important aspects of that is at the beginning of a romantic comedy, and this is true of actually almost any movie, they should have something we don't officially, it's kind of like a status quo problem. We don't get that official when we're dealing, you know, brainstorming and working together. But it's that, oh, this person enters this movie with already X problem, and then that problem will be solved by the end of the movie. Hopefully the problem, it can be emotional, it can be physical, or it can be a combination of both. So and then that is the character's journey. The character starts off with this issue before the movie even starts, and the resolution of this issue is the end of the movie. So if you guys have seen Love Guaranteed, what that status quo problem is it's both. She has a physical one and she has an emotional one, which is her goal is she needs to win this lawsuit against this dating website to keep her law firm afloat because they're in danger of going under. So she has to go all out for this. Her emotional goal is she is very lonely and shut off to love. And now, of course, every day is about dealing with love and this guy she can't stand who's suing the dating website. And so her journey is about, she needs to learn to not shut herself off, open herself up to love, and take a risk. And of course, both of these questions or both of these goals are reached by the end of the movie.
Exactly. And then also, you know, there's the person she's going to fall in love with, and in a rom-com, that's the love interest. And they also have kind of the same, you know, their own status quo problem that is the basis for their arc. So just to reference Love Guaranteed, it's that, you know, Nick is still smarting over a breakup with his ex, and his journey is to realize that while he's out there and dating, he's also been playing it safe, so he takes a big risk on love since he's fallen for his lawyer. And they each character affects the other's arc and gives each other something, and they would not fall in love without smashing in together with these different status quo problems.
Exactly. And it usually involves sacrifice at some point that will end up resolving itself. So in Love Guaranteed, Nick is willing, if you guys haven't watched it, sorry, we're kind of ruining the end. But in Love Guaranteed, Nick would rather find love than win the lawsuit. And he is willing to make that sacrifice. And so usually that level of, one of the characters sacrificing one of their goals is kind of one or both characters is kind of part of that character journey that ultimately makes them getting together all the more satisfying. Because if somebody hasn't, it can, once again, this is a little bit more fluid. It can be the protagonist or the love interest, the second lead, but somebody has to usually the protagonist, but somebody has to make a real sacrifice for them to be together. Sorry, you guys. Also, by the way, it's sunset here, so we keep getting different, weird
I know.
light.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm I might move to a different part of the house at some point.
Because I noticed that the sunset was in my glasses.
I'm basically I'm like a sundial.
Yeah, but so it definitely is. I mean, one of the things that it's we'll come up with all these ideas and stuff, and we're like, oh, this is great, and this person, this is why they'll clash, and this is how they're going to end up falling in love, and here are the things they have in common. But it's definitely about what do they give each other, and why are these two people meant to fall in love? Mm. And part of that is just digging deep into these characters, and so. A lot of the times it's just that the other one is what they needed. So in the movie
But
no, I was just going to say in the movie that just wrapped, I'll just quickly say, in the movie just wrapped in Lost and Found, one of the things that one of the characters really needs a kick in the butt, and the arrival of our protagonist is exactly, and she shakes up his world, is the kick in the butt he needs. It's how do they spur each other on to these character arcs and these goals?
Yeah, and I think it's also, it's going back to these fundamentals of love. It's you fall in love with a person that understands you, and being understood for the first time, and somebody who, we've all been in relationships where someone's projecting something onto us or us to them, and when you finally find the person where it's they get you for who you are, that's a huge thing. And I think that's something people like to see on screen and know oh yeah, that actually exists in the real world.
Exactly. The more human and relatable you can make your characters, the more likely that I think that your romantic comedy will be successful, because once again, we want to be these people. So let's make them somebody that we actually want to be. And that doesn't mean that they have to be noble. They just have to be human.
Yeah.
So, and then very quickly, supporting characters. After we build out our main characters and what these journeys are going to be, we really look into our supporting characters, and we honestly have a ton of fun with the supporting characters. A lot of times, they're there to 100% in a romantic comedy. They're there to support your main character's journey of falling in love, but they can have little mini arcs themselves, or their own little dramas, and it can just be 2 or 3 beats, but it's a lot of fun. So in Love Guaranteed, Susan, the lead, has this office staff, Roberto and Denise, and we probably have more people comment on us about Roberto and Denise than almost half of the other things in that movie, because they're hilarious. They have all this little banter and everything, even though they're really there to support the journey that Susan goes on with Nick.
And they're kind of what we have in real life. It's we have our village of friends, but they're kind of our Greek chorus. They're the people that call us out on the crap we're doing and give advice and are there as a sounding board, but also they ground us. You want those people that it's not just all about the falling in love, it's about the world around you that's supporting it and helping or not helping it.
Right. And that's part of the joy of the romantic comedy is that all parts should be a lot of fun, and and you have an opportunity in all aspects. And once again, I think we already said this, but it's just about characterization. The only thing that really makes any romantic comedy unique or different, it's not that they're going to end up, you know, together. We know that. We're waiting for that moment. It's how fun these people are, and we get super invested.
Yeah,
You know,
it's like what makes the ride special? What makes this ride feel different and feel like, you know, yes, we know all the story beats, but like, why do we watch this again and again?
Right, exactly. So, but speaking of story beats, so next we're going to just talk a little bit about structure and plotting and how we approach that. So, you know, like any movie, romantic comedies have a beginning, middle, and end. I went to film school and we had to take classes, and like on page 20, you do this. And maybe when we first started writing, we kind of felt that way, but Liz and I don't even really follow a structure anymore. We now just intuitively know when first act, second act, and third act are done. And so we, you know, so we gave you guys a resources sheet, or I don't know how it was distributed, but so speaking of which, one of the reasons why we don't have to follow a structure outline or, you know, a book or anything is because we both worked in the entertainment business for many years before we were writers, and between Liz and me, we've probably read like 50,000 scripts. I mean, we've read thousands upon thousands of scripts. And the very best way, you can read all sorts of books, and on our resources sheet, we recommend some books, and they're great. You know, you can take classes, and there's all sorts of, you know, things online, and all of those resources should definitely be tapped into. But the number one way to learn how to write a screenplay is to read screenplays. Yeah. Read screenplays of movies that you liked that were successful, or maybe movies you didn't like that were successful. Those are learning opportunities too.
Or even just reading. I mean, we both started as readers, so even reading a bad
I don't know
script,
what that is, Liz.
A script reader. I don't even know if they have them anymore in Hollywood. This was the 90s. But even reading scripts that don't work is helpful. And now I look like I'm in a horror film.
Turn towards the light in your room.
There we go.
And away from the sun.
It is sunset. I'm by the ocean.
So the thing is yeah, there used to be this job in Hollywood where it was called script reader, because executives were too busy to read all the submissions that they would get. And so they'd have somebody read and kind of just basically write a book report on it. You'd write like a 1-page synopsis and then a 1-page comments. But it was great because we both used to do this, and we just read so many scripts. And it's just fantastic because once you've read a lot of scripts, you just know how to put pen to paper, metaphorically, because you get it. You breathe in the format and everything and the structure, and like, oh, when should this twist be and when should that twist be? But you also learn everything not to do if you read some bad scripts.
I mean, like, it's kind of like making a meal. It's like, you know that you have to start this. You turn the oven on at this time and start this at this time and prep this at this time. And it's not that you're married to the recipe, but it's just the recipe works for a reason. And so you kind of instinctively know by X page, we should have this, and X page, we should have this. And you just kind of intuitively understand it.
You start to learn that.
Read. Yeah.
That said, Liz and I work from an outline, and we would tell anybody who's starting off in the writing career, work from an outline. So we work from a very detailed outline because we actually work in separate places, but even if we didn't, we'd still work from a very detailed outline. Our outline is so detailed that there's dialogue in the outline. You know, like we'll be like, oh, in this scene that takes place at the bakery, somebody's like, nice shoes, or whatever. I don't know, you know, if it's relevant to the plot. So our outlines usually range from about 12 to 18 pages before we go to draft. And outlining is every successful screenwriter I know outlines, and you can do it in any format you want. We don't do one that even makes sense. Some people like do cards, other people do like, you know, like Roman numerals, and then we do bullet points. But it's like it's great because you don't have to be married to the outline. Like, let's say things might work, things might not work. You might get a great idea halfway through and you're like, that's not in the outline. But if you don't have an outline, the chances, I think, of finishing are slim. And also it's so easy to go off the rails if you don't have an outline, because you just kind of forgot about like what you were supposed to be doing. And you're like, why am I on page 200 and this doesn't make any sense?
No, I agree. I will also, just to quickly digress, we do have a question. From Jenny Winter, could you please give some other examples of kinds of sacrifices characters can make, e.g. their principles, other kinds? What are some sacrifices?
Well, I think that the sacrifices that people usually make are, well, okay, so it comes down usually to a choice at the end of a romantic comedy. You're going to fly off to Kenya and do that safari, or you're going to stay and be with the guy or whatever, So falling in love, it was the choice of moving back to the United States for a really great job or staying in New Zealand. In the thing that we shot right now, I don't want to ruin it, but she comes to Australia for a very specific mission. She fails at it, and she accepts failure, which is her sacrifice, because she is not a character who accepts failure, because she has felt like betrayed in love, but also it's like the right thing to do because she was betrayed in love. It's like it's the way for her to exit with her dignity and to be able to move on and forge her own path. So
and it doesn't always have to be a sacrifice. Sometimes it's just a noble gesture. It's like if you're thinking of like Pride and Prejudice, it's like when Mr. Darcy fixes Lydia's marital situation and does it for Elizabeth Bennet. I mean, it can be a noble gesture that they do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We have some, what software program do you use to collaborate remotely? That's funny that you say that. Final Draft does have a thing called Collaborate, which is a little annoying if you guys use Final Draft over there. It's the industry standard in Hollywood, which is the screenwriting program. And it does have this thing called Collaborate, which we do use, especially during the pandemic. But we usually just email and text each other all day long.
Yeah, I mean, Final Draft in Los Angeles is kind of the industry standard. I mean, it has its quirks and people have their complaints, but that is sort of what we all use. So many new writers.
I'm just chipping in here, sorry to interrupt, but we might, I don't know what you want to do, but we can hold the questions if you
we have just a few more things to go, and then
let's hold off. Okay. We've got all the questions, and then we'll come back.
Sure.
So moving on from outline, we already talked about character should drive story. So, it very quickly in Falling in Love, Gabriella, she's recently dumped and also recently unemployed. She enters a win and in contest and she actually wins. So her character impulsively did something and she now has to follow through on it. So it's definitely should be that your character is teeing all the things up. So for instance, after she gets to New Zealand and claims her in, it's a dump. She could either offload it or her character decides she's going to stay in New Zealand and fix it up herself. So your protagonist should always be making choices that are moving the plot forward. So in romantic comedies,
or that are accidentally undoing herself or himself.
Or tripping themselves up. But the choices but that's still also moving the plot forward. The thing is that whatever action comes out of it, whether it's pro or con or successful or a disaster, a hilarious disaster, your protagonist, or once in a while your other love interest, is the cause of that. They made it happen.
And one thing that we both had a mutual boss, and one thing he always said was torture your main characters. And
exactly. So go ahead, Liz, if you want.
Oh, no, go.
Well, I was just going to say, so like in Falling in Love, Gabriella has a truly embarrassing run-in with Jake soon after arriving. He's like literally the last person she ever wants to see again. But of course, he is the only contractor in town. So now they are forced to work together. So that set us up for a situation where we could torture them in a fun way, because they don't, they are like this, getting each other's goat. So... And then you really want to give your two romantic leads moments. So Liz wrote a very funny line, and I mean, it's corny and we love it. So they're restoring and falling in love. They're restoring an old fireplace. And Gabriella had wanted to get rid of it and Jake wanted to keep it. And she's staring at the fireplace and she goes, oh, she's a beaut, you know, talking about the restoration. And then Jake is staring at her and he goes, she sure is. And it's stupid. And yet, oh my God, people blow up. When that movie came out, people on Twitter were like, I was all over Twitter about how people loved that moment. So the fun, along with torturing them, is definitely finding those cheesy, fun, romantic moments that the audience, you know, just really goes for. So to dig deep, like you really, here's the thing. Here's our best advice. Dig deep. If you suspect something isn't good enough, it's not. Go back. I can't tell you how many times listening, like, it's probably good enough for like, nope, good enough is never acceptable.
And this is the hardest part of writing. And you'll know it. You'll know like, oh, this could be more. And different directors we've worked with, it's like, it's, you learn how to realize like, we got to find the more. What's the more here? There's like, this is just not enough of a scene. And you just kind of, in your stomach, you know it.
Because our biggest piece of advice about writing romantic comedies or writing in general is writing is rewriting. And it is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. So
until you hate it so much you want to set it on fire, and then it's ready, to turn in.
Yeah. So Lost and Found, the movie that just shot, we wrote 12 official drafts. 12 official drafts that were submitted to Netflix and the studio and the directors and producers. Admittedly, a number of those were at towards the end when we had to do a bunch of production rewrites for like, we couldn't get that location, so we had to rewrite it for a different location. But there was at least 6 or 7 official creative drafts that went to Netflix. And I would say for every one of those, Liz, there's probably 2 or 3 that we wrote and never, like, that were interim drafts between you and me.
Yeah.
Liz and I wrote an entire draft of that movie that we threw out because we didn't think it was good enough and started over from scratch. So when you feel discouraged, you know what you do? You go, you make a cup of coffee or you pour a giant glass of wine and you take a little break and then you go back to it and you just keep going. Like,
or take a day off, or I mean, it's
and just just step away and then go back to it. Don't abandon your project, but just realize it's rewriting. And we probably wrote Lost and Found for over a year, Liz, before it got greenlit.
Yes.
We were writing on that for a year. We wrote it different. All those 12 drafts took about a year, but the movie's now completed. We're extremely happy with how it's looking so far. Yeah. And it's thrilling. It seemed to turn out great. Like, the actors loved it. The director loved it. It was so fun and awesome. So it wasn't in vain. Is what we're
and then that also kind of speaks to like the next part of it, which was like, they had great input. The director, the actors, the talent. You know, I mean, the talent is, they're the ones who are going to be saying these lines, and the director is the one who's going to be, you know, steering the ship. And so they're going to have things where they're like, this doesn't work for me, or maybe what about this, or what about this? And the fun part of this is listening to that and realizing like, oh, wait, you know what? They're completely right. Or, you know what? We want them to be happy, and they do it better that way. That was great. That was better than what we wrote.
Yeah, definitely. Because our experience is, you know, you get creative notes from everybody, the studio, production companies, producers, directors, the actor. And it's about being able to address everybody's notes and satisfy them, and yet stay true to your voice and the material. We've often found that most of the time, as long as you answer the note, even if it wasn't, as long as you solve the problem, you don't have, you know what I mean? They're just looking for you to creatively solve the problem. And I just a little, like, here in Hollywood and Los Angeles filmmaking, it's like writers who don't take notes get replaced. So it's one of the most important things to be able to like listen to those notes, take them in and think, okay, what's the creative impetus behind that? And how can I make this better? And I think every set of notes we got on Lost and Found made it a better movie.
Yeah, because you also have to ask yourself, like, what's the note behind the note? I mean, somebody might say, well, it's not funny enough. And it's like, well, actually, if you look for the note behind the note behind the note is there's not enough conflict between these two people. So there's not enough conflict to mine for comedy.
Yeah. So, all right, we know you guys want to get to the question. So we're just going to very quickly talk about two other things. Um, we write as a team. That is very common in Hollywood. I'd say 50% of writers are teams, probably. I don't know why it's so common, but we can tell you why it works. So what's great is you have a built-in critique partner. You split the money, of course, but you split the work. And so what's fantastic about that is I'm just like, Liz, is this funny? I don't know. And then she'll read it and she'll be like, yeah, this part of it's funny, but this part's terrible or whatever. And that's great. We have complementary skill sets. We both can write every part of a script and have written stuff on our own, but writing together, I love building the house, and Liz loves doing all the interior decorating. And we'd switch off. There's times she's doing the roof and I'm, painting a wall inside, but I'm just saying, like, I love structure and I love figuring out those difficult plot things. And Liz is so good at the little character moments and the funny little dialogue things that you see in the trailer. And so all we would suggest, the cons of writing together, we do not suffer from. The cons of writing together is you have to split the money, but you can work twice as much stuff. You can get things done faster. But the cons is if
you're stuck, you're like, here you go. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Page 70 is yours.
But if you don't like each other, it's probably miserable. We know a very successful writing duo that they're not romantically involved, but they go to couples therapy because they can't stand each other, but they can't break up because they make so much money together. So all our suggestion would be is if you do want to write as a friend, find somebody with similar sensibilities, because Liz and I have the exact same sense of humor. We laugh at the same things. We like the same movies. So it's great. We have the same sensibilities. And then also just somebody we like each other. We're very, very good friends in real life. We were in each other's weddings. We enjoy each other's company. So it really makes the day go a lot faster.
And also, like, film is, like, by its very nature, a very collaborative medium. So just already being comfortable working with something, the moment people start to get involved in your script, there's a director, there's producers, there's actors, there's the practicality of, like, can you actually have a herd of horses in this movie? And you're going to work. I mean, it's a village. And so I think there is something to be said for, you don't have to go it alone. I mean, that's why people love writers' rooms and partnerships, because it takes more people.
So one of our things is if you don't write with a partner, we gave you guys, or you guys are going to get this thing of resources of different ideas that we have for you guys to study scripts, resources, if you're looking for further education and screenplay writing, books, podcasts to listen to, Twitter to follow. So you guys can check that out. And then, but what's something we didn't put on there is we'd highly recommend forming a writing group. One of the best ways to make sure that you do get your script done is accountability. And so if you have a writing group, it doesn't have to be like everybody has to read everybody's full script each time. You guys can just choose 5 pages, 10 pages to read over Zoom, or you can do it in person. And just meet like every other week or something, and just make sure you're getting your pages done. And then also get awesome feedback from your peers about, like, oh, I don't think you're missing that character moment. Like, I feel like this is when she should tell him, like, they're in love or whatever. So,
I mean, that is the hardest part of being a writer, is like, you really are in a room by yourself, but also, especially with a script, hearing it out loud, if you can have friends who are actors read it for you, is insanely helpful.
Even your other friends in the writers group can read it quite successfully. We read stuff to each other all the time.
Yes, which is hilarious.
Liz can do accents, so it's fun. I cannot.
But it really is, I mean, in your mind it's one way, but somebody interprets that line a different way, or it just doesn't sound great out loud, or it sounds better than you thought, and you think, oh crap, like we should have written that person more dialogue, because that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's all right. So Belinda, I think that's with our prepared stuff. We can do the Q&A.
Okay, so thank you. And I'll just make a note that everyone who registered should have received the resource pack from Hilary and Liz already. If you haven't, just reach out to us and we can send it to you. But that was circulated yesterday. We've got a lot of amazing questions coming through. I had a quick question first, if you don't mind. I write fiction. I just wanted to know, what's your routine? Are you really like Woody Allen? You get up every morning, sit down. Are you really kind of fixed with your discipline, or are you a bit more free flowing? What's your kind of writing routine?
Well, I think we're each different because Hilary is more disciplined than I am. She
Mm.
gets up, she does her yoga, she has breakfast, she does her work. I put it off until the last possible moment where I realize it's 3 in the morning and I have to send her something by 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
So I do the 15
I,
pages then.
I will say though, our producers always love us when we're in production because one of us is awake at any given
Yes.
time writing. But yeah, I like to have a routine,
Yeah.
and so I think it's different for everybody because I definitely have my writing hours, and yeah, Liz is much more will like just cram it in somewhere. So and I think it's for whatever works for each person. Like I blow dry my hair and put on makeup before I sit down and write, like it's a job.
Yeah. In the zone. Thanks.
I'm wearing the pants I wore for the past 3 days.
Very complimentary.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to some of these fantastic questions. Many writers use devices to create conflict. For example, a car speeds down the street, hitting character A, the roses fly through the air and scatter, destroyed. What advice do you have to enable a writer to avoid creating multiple random devices for the sake of conflict?
Yes, I call those conveniences, and you can only have one a movie. You can have one. You're allowed one.
Yes, I think you're allowed one. But this is the hardest part of it. It's how do you make a something that is a coincidence or a meet cute or something that hasn't been seen before or doesn't feel obvious. And this is a huge struggle. I mean, every script we're like, oh gosh, and then something comes to you, but it is.
And I think our best advice for that is that's once again, it's one of those brainstorming things. So we wrote a script many years ago that didn't sell or anything, but we wanted a car chase in it. And we're like, oh my gosh, like they're right. You've seen every car chase on the face of the earth. How are we going to do a car chase differently? And so we had them actually go into, I don't know if you guys have these in Australia, but we have these car washes where you can sit in your car and you can go through the car wash while you're in your car. So we had them go in it. So it was this super slow speed car chase where they're inching along in the car wash, one car behind the other, because we were like, that's funny because you've never really seen, like, it's just about trying to taking the trope and then how can you flip that on your head is the way that you avoid endless conveniences to move your story forward.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so a lot of people writing their first few screenplays seem to write a lot of derivative material, or worse, subconsciously rewrite an already produced story. What advice do you have for writers so that they avoid this kind of spiral of, producing things that are already out there?
I think it's kind of a never-ending struggle because you'll have this amazing line of dialogue that comes to you and you're like, oh no, that's from The Princess Bride, or it's some movie that you saw on an airplane once, and it's because things, they just sort of burrow into your head, and it's hard. I mean, I think this is why having peers read your work and and push you and challenge you and say, like, I think you can dig deeper on this one. And I mean, this is the hardest part of writing is the constructive criticism. And it's hard when somebody says to you, like, I don't think you cracked it. You didn't push hard enough, you phoned it in. And it's also the best thing you can hear, because the scripts that you're very proud of are the ones where you realize, oh, you know what, they're right.
It's like if you don't feel like you gave birth, it's not there.
Got to suffer.
But I wouldn't feel bad about it because it happens all the time. I mean, there are times I'll think of something and I'm like, oh, you know what? Oh, that was a tweet from someone I know that they wrote in 2014.
Liz, I think we've also accidentally written a joke and then realized, oh my God, wait, we wrote that joke like in a different movie.
Yeah. That has happened. That has happened.
Yeah. And how do you kind of fill up the creative juices? Is there anything you do to kind of keep the ideas flowing? Yeah.
Get out in the world. Yeah. Go to the supermarket, grocery store, see friends. But my favorite thing, honestly, is the grocery store, because everyone goes to the grocery store. And you're seeing all sorts of stories, and you're seeing people that are mad at each other, or children that are upset, and people are saying things. Or the airport is another great place because everyone has to travel, and lots of times it's families or couples or people that are going to or coming from something, and just being around people and kind of hearing or overhearing their human moments, I find to be really helpful.
I also think, though, consuming other art is very important. I definitely feel that way. I read books. Liz and I both read. We watch everything on TV. Go to the, we used to go to the movies in the before times, and we will soon again. So one day, art, theater, go to the theater, dance, anything like that. I find inspiration and recharging from all of those things.
Yeah. And I think also it's helpful to figure out what you liked or didn't like about something, and articulating why it worked or didn't work for you is helpful in terms of figuring out your own writing. Is, oh wow, this thing could have been this thing. And, oh, they just made so many misfires, and here's how I would have done it.
Great. Okay, so next question. What do you look for in a good rom-com pitch? What are some of the ingredients?
Personally, we don't normally have people pitch to us, but if somebody wanted to pitch to us, I would, first of all, whenever I see something or somebody tells me about their project and I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had thought of that, then I know it's good. When I'm jealous of their idea or their characters, it's good. And then anything that makes me laugh out loud. Because I love comedy and I like to laugh, but I actually don't laugh out loud at movies and TV shows very often. So when I laugh out loud, then I'm like, sold, it's done. So it's about, when we're pitching, we make sure to obviously go over everything we talked about. We really talk about our characters and definitely like their goals and their journeys. We tell it in a very narrative style, like we're telling a story. But we make sure to put jokes in our pitch, is what I'm trying to say. Like either we have like little snippets of dialogue, or we just do a little wordplay or something, because we're like, if we don't make them laugh in the room, then then why would they believe that we can deliver the comedy part of the romantic comedy?
Well, and you want them to feel like they're watching you tell them about a movie. It's like a campfire story. It's like you want to feel like you have been told an amazing bedtime story. And but also I think that the element of, this is horrible, but like the element of jealousy, like when you hear an idea and you're like, oh, why didn't we think of that? That's so clear. Like, oh, do you want
yeah.
Okay, we have a question. How did you sell your first script? What are some steps to doing that? And is it achievable for an Australian writer trying to sell in to LA?
Okay, so we did do because we didn't know as much about the Australian film industry, or we educated ourselves before this webinar, and we know you guys have like endowments and like a state, that it's supported by the government and everything. We don't have that here, so it is tougher to break in. Liz and I both were executives in the film business before we became writers. So we had a big leg up. And honestly, one of the best ways to become a writer in Hollywood is to live here and work in the business, just become somebody's assistant somewhere at some production company, that kind of thing. But that said, we wrote a script, and we, because we knew people, we did get representation, and we sold our first spec almost 20 years ago. It was a family comedy to MGM. And but advice to break into this business.
I will tell
Go ahead, Liz.
The complimentary side of that story was, which I always tell people because it should be encouraging. We thought we would immediately have an agent, and we sent it to 5, 6, 7 people we knew, and we didn't get signed. And it was the last, most random person that we sent it to who liked it and sold it 1 week later. So I think it's also about not taking any rejection as a final decision. It's, press on through it. And I think that is the hardest part of writing, is sometimes the rejection is the best gift you got.
Exactly. But to circle back to the Hollywood thing, if you're interested in breaking it, from our understanding that there are certain resources in Australia for screenwriters to be able to meet executives and movers and shakers in Hollywood. If those resources don't pan out, in the resources guide we gave you guys, you can use the UCLA screenwriting program online, and that you can make a lot of contacts that way. We didn't put this in our resources guide, but there are some screenwriting contests that you can enter. The one we'd really recommend is the Nichols Fellowship, because that's run by the Academy. You can Google, put legitimate screenwriting contests, because otherwise there's a bunch that will just take your money and then they literally pull a script out of the pile. But I think Final Draft runs one, the Nichols, there's the Austin Film Festival. Their screenwriting competition is quite legitimate. So there's like 5 or 6 of those that often, if you place in their agents and managers and production companies, will be very interested in reading your material. And then another way is, many of the studios, Disney, almost all of the networks, and you can Google this too to just kind of look into it, they have writing internships. And I'm pretty sure that they can be done virtually right now in the time of COVID, but if not, I think that they help if you're not American to come over here and house or whatever. And they are usually like, Sundance also does a lab that's like this, where they will help you develop a project. And like the woman that wrote Guardians of the Galaxy, she was a co-writer on it. She was in one of those programs, the Disney program, where they're like, we want to try to write Marvel movies that, you know, are not the usual Marvel characters. And she looked through all the backlog of Marvel and she's like, I want to write this one. And then it turned into Guardians of the Galaxy. So those you can all apply for online. Just Google those, and writing fellowships and screenwriting fellowships, and those are all things that are just open for applications. I think there's also a list if you go on the WGA, the Writers Guild of America website. They have some resources there. But besides that, though, the best way, unfortunately, to break into Hollywood is to live here. So pack your bags and move to America.
Well, but I think it's also to have the finished script. I think we're in this world now where in the old days you could go in and you'd pitch, but now a script has a shelf life. It can sell tomorrow, it can sell 5 years from now, it can sell 15 years from now. And I think if you actually have the thing on paper, that you're ahead of a lot of people.
Yes, agreed.
So I would say, even if it's just an idea where you're like, oh, write it, because you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So we had a question about Hallmark becoming more open to comedy than they used to be with their romances. Can you please tell us a little bit more about this?
Well, Hallmark's trying to become a little bit more finally like 2021. So they used to be pretty conservative, and now you can, not only can you be a little bit funnier, but they also now have more interracial relationships. You can drink wine now on Hallmark. It used to kind of be no, like you can so and they want to represent more LGBTQ in Hallmark movies, and they have been doing that. So that's all good news, progress. And so that's, we wrote a movie that was shot. It was one of the very first things that went into production as soon as we could, when they had lifted COVID restrictions. So it was shot in summer 2020 and aired in fall 2020 called My Best Friend's Bouquet. And it was fun because we did get to be a little bit more comedic in it. It had a diverse cast, which is very unusual for Hallmark. And it was fun. If you're looking to get into the Hallmark game, there's a lot of steps, but Hallmark does, they make 92 original movies a year, something like that, Liz, right? And there's also the Hallmark Murders and Movies and Mysteries channel or whatever. They make a lot of original content. So it is, if you have connections, know anything about it, it is a worthwhile. But once again, they kind of like scripts that are already written. So they would rather take a script that's maybe not quite perfect for them, but that's already written, and have you rewrite it than to take a pitch. Yeah.
And write the movie you want to see. Like, what do you want to see? Write that.
Exactly.
And then you have it. And it can sell whenever.
That's great. Okay, so what's the process of getting a script read and bought by a production company look like? How does that
Ooh.
kind of work?
Well, for us, we have representation. So we, at this point, our managers do everything for us. So we don't have to go. We've never really had to go through that. There are really in Los Angeles and Hollywood, it's very few producers or entities that could make your movie will read something if you do not have representation. It's just a catch-22. There's just too many legalities to it. We even have legalities with the Writers Guild that like we can't hear unsolicited stuff, and so it is a process to get representation. Probably the best step would be to get representation in Australia and then move from there, and from what I understand, you guys get a lot of support in all of that. So I think then once you're representing somebody in Australia, or I know British people, when they're represented there, it's so much easier for them to reach out to contacts in Hollywood. But then the process, I don't think there's anything the process is, if somebody wants to buy it, then they call and make you an offer, and it's usually really low. Well, we're in a guild, so there's standards that they have to pay us, but and then our lawyer takes it from there. It's you sell a lot of stuff that never gets made. It's heartbreaking, but you send your baby off and you hope something good happens, but you got to just have the next baby lined up. You got to already be moving on to the next baby, and anything good that happens.
You do kind of have to line them up like planes in an airport, because it's you never know which one's going to take off, and the one you love won't, and the one you thought, oh, whatever, that's the one.
Yep.
So how many scripts will you have kind of on the go at one time, or do you just focus on one very particular script and put that?
We have at least 2 or 3 things percolating at any time.
Yeah.
And some are just still in like idea stage or outline stage, just because once again, you never know. But also sometimes you're like, well, this is sort of an idea, but we haven't quite cracked it, but it's in the file, and at the same time.
But yeah, there definitely should be a couple of things. We're writing a new movie for Netflix. We're pitching a TV series with ABC Signature, and then we also just recently sold a podcast to Audible that's a narrative fictional podcast. So it's like, yeah, definitely should have many pots boiling.
Yeah. Great. And then there's a question around the airport trope that I know you spoke about before, but it keeps popping up. Why does it work? Will it ever be overdone?
Oh, well, you have to race through the airport to get somebody?
Well, yeah, it's kind of pre 9/11, because that was like, it really is like an ultimate, like, there's a fissure. This person's getting on an airplane and flying away. So this is the last moment to see them before they're literally in the air. And I think that's why it was very easy. I think now there's so much TSA safety stuff that.
But if you wanted to do the airport trope, see, that would be funny, because then you could have a lot of comedy with the TSA of it all, and like you can't get there, and and so we were talking about that, about turning tropes on their head. Like, you can get a lot of mileage in a romantic comedy of being like, okay, well, this is the typical thing. How do I make this funny and fresh and different? Like, this person's trying to like bypass TSA, and now they're being tackled by security, and like, so there are tropes for sure that always kind of work, and usually one is that the other person is going away forever. It's just about how do you make the going away forever feel fresh.
Yes.
Okay. And just, I think we've kind of covered this, but that idea of ideas for new films, do you wait until someone wants something, or are you just constantly writing all the time?
I think you have to not pay attention to what people want, because then you're writing what somebody else wants versus what you yourself want to write. And again, you might have to sit with a script for 10 years. Yeah. So you better really like it. And if you're writing something because you think it's going to sell in that marketplace, because, this kind of horror movie came out, or, what have you, the tides turn very quickly, and suddenly that's not in fashion, or they've read 40 scripts that are exactly like that. So I think you really have to write the movie you want to see, and write, and trust that it can weather, you know, the tide of trends. And, you know, I mean, Hollywood is definitely very much like, oh, well, this, you know, Dune is doing great. What's our next Dune? Or Game of Thrones is doing great. But it's like, well, they did great because they were very strong sources of literary material. And, you know, they had a big fan base because they were strong stories.
Yeah.
So it's, what is your strong story?
It's great. Okay. Well, we might have one or two more questions and then we might wrap up. Is that good? So do you ever find yourself having to abandon a script or pop it in the drawer for a while, let it percolate for a few years? Or do you kind of just keep on going? You've got your outline.
Oh no, here's the thing. I would say keep going 99% of the time, but that doesn't mean you don't have to abandon something. We have like a couple of abandoned scripts, and then I go back and look at them and I'm like, gosh, they're kind of funny. But like, and I'm like, maybe they can be saved, but it's like, not right now. The reason I would normally tell people not to abandon, I think we have 2 abandoned scripts when I think about it. So honestly, over a 20-year career, I don't think that that's too bad. And so that's actually going to be my point. Over a 20-year career, the fact that we've only abandoned 2 scripts ever, like didn't show them to anybody, like didn't try to sell them. Because we've had scripts we've tried to sell that didn't sell, but that's okay. We're still proud of them. Is that that we've written dozens and dozens of things and we've only abandoned 2. And so that only goes to show, yes, there is a time to put something away, and we always think of it as putting something aside, you know?
Yeah.
But I would say more often than not, though, when you feel like abandoning something, that's when you need to go and, like I said, have your cup of coffee, or like Liz said, take your day off and then come back to it, because it's too easy to have like 14 unfinished scripts. Just power through it. Our abandoned things are finished. They're not only finished, they're polished. It's just that for one reason or the other, we're like, oh, maybe this isn't working. So
yeah.
Okay, and the last question for this morning. So how locked into rom-com are you? We hear a lot about the business liking to pigeonhole writers, and transitioning can be difficult. Have you found that, or you just love rom-com and very happy?
I think this is an excellent question. So there definitely is a brand, like you brand yourself, and branding yourself is a very smart thing to do, because then you are the go-to for certain things. People are like, oh, like Hackett and Galanoy rom-coms, right?
Well, and it's also, but it's for your agent or manager, they know how to sell you. And when you're especially first starting out, if you're like, I have a rom-com, I have a thriller, I have a horror, and they're like, so if you can give them one thing where they're like, oh, I have a great new thriller writer, it helps them sell you because they're salespeople. But yes, you want to stay employed. That is part of it. But then you do reach the point, which, Hilary, go on.
Well, but you don't have to. So we are transitioning. We are pitching something that is an ensemble soapy comedy with a crime element. So
for television instead of
for television. And so here's how you transition if you want to branch out: is you just take the next step over. You don't say, I've written romantic comedies and now I'm writing Squid Game, you know, like that's not gonna fly. All right. But if you're like, oh, I wrote romantic comedies and now I'm writing like a soapy, like, you know, a nighttime soap, okay, like on TV, like, you know, then people, so it's like, oh, I was writing romantic comedies and now I'm writing Gossip Girl. Somebody's like, all right, I can see that it's
a natural.
And then you could go from writing Gossip Girl to like, oh, now I'm going to write something a little darker or whatever, because that was a little darker than, you know what I'm saying? So it's about, like, Ryan Murphy is the perfect example of this. Ryan Murphy started writing romantic comedies, and now, of course, Ryan Murphy writes everything. He writes horror. He does those American, if you guys get those over there, the American, whatever. No, but now there's the Monica Lewinsky one, and there was the O.J. Simpson one, and he wrote Glee. But see, Glee was just a step away from writing romantic comedies, you know? And so then each time he could take a further step to expand his career and then become Ryan Murphy. So, so no, you don't have to be pigeonholed, but be good at what you do before you try to do something new.
Yeah. Okay. I think we might start to wrap up there. One quick question and then we'll finish. When you wrote Rags, did you write the songs also, or the words to the song?
We did.
I love that we have a Rags. I love that we have a Rags fan. That's so amazing.
We did not write the songs. We wrote the titles and we wrote what the song would be about. And then a singer-songwriter wrote the actual lyrics and music.
So sometimes you, and by the way, sometimes you would like write the music. In that situation, we did not. Nick Cannon was a executive producer on that movie, and he was married to Mariah Carey at that time. So they just brought in Mariah's, like it was just super, like
They had much better people than us.
but like if you guys are fans of I'm really dating myself, but of Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show, they had a musical version, and Joss Whedon and his brother, who's a musician, wrote all the music and songs. So it just really depends on your skill set.
Yeah.
For us, no, that's not our skill set.
Brilliant.
We can't sing or play musical instruments.
Neither of us, no talent whatsoever.
Wow. Liz and Hilary, thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing. I've learned a heap. I'm sure everyone else has learned.
I hope so. I hope so. Sorry that
love your advice on the outline.
I know. I'm sorry that I'm in like a horror movie. It just
our lighting situation
dark here.
Yeah. Suddenly,
I know. The ocean is right there, and the sun went down. So now
we're having this weird heat wave, and then it suddenly got dark, and it's just very odd. So it's just so odd because it's like you keep saying this morning. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's
dinner time. Great.
I'm in like the Blair Witch. I'm like, same me.
Your hair is still illuminated. You look great.
But this has been great. I hope that we've been helpful, and we were very excited to talk to you guys. And we're just really thrilled that our latest movie is set in Australia, and we only wish that we could have been there. COVID.
We can't wait to see it. We cannot wait. I just have 2022, so I don't have anything more specific.
We'll let you know. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
When we have an official title and release date. So.
Thank you so much. It was brilliant. And I'll say again, if the people out there haven't got the resource pack, it's fantastic, and just shout out to us and we'll make sure that you get that. I'll also do a quick plug. We've got a Hoodlum event coming up. So Hoodlum, the obviously fantastic production company behind Lost and Found, and that's coming up on the 16th of November. So that's an in real life event. So mark that in your diaries, everyone on the call today. That'll be fantastic as well. But once again, I can see your cat in the back.
That's a dog.
That's a dog. Sorry, it's dog.
I know. She looks like a cat. Betty. It's my other dog was wandering around in the background at one point too, and I was like,
Yeah, no, it's great. And thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And you have a great, what is it? Is it evening? Have a great evening.
It's Wednesday evening here. So thanks you guys. Thanks so much for having
us. And thanks for everyone for joining in today as well. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.